A quarterback walks up to a microphone. Reporters are waiting. The questions are pointed. The city is divided. And instead of giving the safe, polished, PR-approved answer that every NFL veteran learns to give in their second or third year in the league, Deshaun Watson looks into the camera and says something that stops the entire room cold. Something that on the surface sounds like composure. Like professionalism. Like a man who has been through too much to be rattled by outside noise. But underneath those words, if you read them carefully, if you understand the context of who was in that room and what had been said about him in the days leading up to that press conference, there is a message. A specific, pointed, unmistakable message. And the question that the entire Cleveland Browns fanbase is now asking is the one this video is going to answer. Was Deshaun Watson's shocking statement meant for the fans? For the media? For Todd Monken? Or was it meant for the one person in that building whose name has been attached to every single conversation about Watson's future for the past 6 months, Shedeur Sanders? Subscribe right now if you are new here, because this channel finds the story inside the story. Hit that button and stay all the way to the end. Let's set the scene perfectly. Because the context of when Watson said what he said matters as much as the words themselves. It was a Wednesday media availability during the Browns' mandatory minicamp in June 2026. The quarterback competition had been heating up all spring. Todd Monken had just said the day before, on a Tuesday, that the competition was too close to call. That phrase, too close to call, coming from the head coach about a competition that most of the football world had assumed Watson would win easily, was an earthquake. It meant Shedeur Sanders had not just closed the gap. He had made the competition genuinely uncertain. And Watson knew exactly what Monken had said before he walked up to that microphone. A reporter asked Watson directly about the fact that he did not have all the support you would hope to have from Cleveland Browns fans heading into the summer. The implication was clear. Cleveland fans, a significant portion of them, were not rooting for Watson. They were rooting for Shedeur. They were chanting Shedeur's name in the stadium. They were posting about Shedeur on social media. They were calling radio shows demanding Shedeur get the starting job. And now a reporter was putting that reality in front of Watson's face and asking him to respond to it. Watson did not flinch. He said, "At the end of the day, I can't control what people support. I think that's their own opinions. I think that all I can do is just put out the best person I am, showcase who I am as a person, as a player, as a teammate, and what I represent as an individual. So outside of that, I can't focus on what the outside is saying. I have no control over that other than just putting out the best product that I can put out as a person and as a player." Calm. Measured. Professional. Almost perfectly constructed. And when you read those words in a vacuum, they sound like exactly what they appear to be: a veteran quarterback choosing not to engage with the noise and instead focusing on his own performance. But here is what changes everything about how you hear those words. 3 weeks earlier, a Cleveland Browns executive named J.W. Johnson III, the team's vice president of player personnel, had stood in front of reporters and said something that caused a firestorm of its own. He said that Browns fans who are rooting against Watson, rooting specifically for Shedeur Sanders, need to be supportive as much as they can if Watson wins the starting job. An executive telling fans who to root for. An executive essentially asking the Cleveland fan base to get in line behind a quarterback they have not chosen to embrace, and reminding them that if Watson wins this competition, they are going to need to put their Shedeur flags away and support the veteran. That statement from Johnson created a backlash unlike anything the Browns front office had generated all offseason, and the offseason had already generated a tremendous amount of controversy. Fans felt talked down to. They felt like the organization was telling them their feelings were wrong. They felt like the front office was more concerned with protecting Watson's feelings than with giving Shedeur Sanders the fair shot he had earned. And that anger, raw, personal, Cleveland-specific anger built on 27 years of failed quarterback decisions, was the exact environment Watson was walking into when he stepped to that microphone. So when Watson said, "I can't control what people support," he was not just answering a reporter's question. He was responding to an entire city. He was speaking to the fans who booed Dillon Gabriel and chanted Shedeur's name in that same stadium. He was speaking to the people who had been calling radio shows for weeks saying Watson should step aside. He was speaking to the Cleveland sports talk world that had been debating his very right to even compete for this job. And then, in that same media availability, Watson was asked specifically about Monken's too close to called comment. And his response to that question is where the real message lives. "I just show up every day, so I can't control coaches," Watson said. "He's the head coach. He's the one calling the plays and he's got to decide who he wants out there on the field. So at the end of the day, I got to just show up each and every day and be ready and wait until my number is called." Wait until my number is called. That phrase, which is almost word for word what Shedeur Sanders himself has been saying in press conferences all spring, was either an unconscious parallel or a very conscious echo. Because Shedeur, when asked the same types of questions about the competition, has consistently deflected with similar language. "I'm not a judge. My job is to make sure when my number is called, I'm ready." And now Watson was using almost identical framing. Whether that was deliberate, whether Watson was consciously mirroring Shedeur's calm composure to signal that he could play that game too, or whether it was coincidence, the symmetry was striking. And here is where the story takes a genuinely fascinating turn. Because in that same Wednesday media session, Shedeur Sanders was asked about the competition with Watson. And his response, given in the same building, on the same day, to the same reporters, was dramatically different from what you would expect given the level of tension swirling around this situation. Shedeur said, "I don't think I'm in a competition. We're just focused on being the best player we can be as an individual and as a good teammate." He was not in a competition. He was focused on himself. And on his teammates. Read both answers together. Watson says, "I can't control what people support and I wait until my number is called." Shedeur says, "I don't think I'm in a competition." These are two men who are competing for the same job, on the same team, in the same building, and both of them are publicly refusing to acknowledge the competition as the central, defining feature of their professional lives right now. Watson because he is a veteran who has learned that engaging with external drama is professionally dangerous. Shedeur because he has learned that his best weapon in this battle is the quiet confidence that no outsider can rattle. But the people rattling from the outside were not being quiet at all. Shannon Sharpe, who had been one of the most vocal voices on the Nightcap podcast about this entire situation, said something that same week that cut through everything with surgical precision. "Now, we maybe have 3-4 weeks of that, and then we got to make a switch," Sharpe said, referring to how long Watson would get at the start of training camp before the situation forced a QB change. 3 or 4 weeks. Even shorter than Chad Johnson's 6-week countdown. Sharpe was saying that the window in which Watson would be given to prove himself was shrinking, not expanding, as more insiders got information about how the spring competition had actually gone. And then ESPN analyst Tim Hasselbeck dropped a bomb that landed with a very specific kind of authority, because Hasselbeck is not a social media personality. He is a former NFL quarterback himself. He played the position. He knows what it looks and feels like when a quarterback has it and when a quarterback does not. And on ESPN's NFL Live, he stated plainly, with his name and credibility attached, Watson has no shot at regaining the job. He went further. He said Watson's credibility has been compromised. That is a specific kind of indictment. Not that Watson is too injured. Not that Watson is too old. That his credibility, the intangible currency that players spend their entire careers building, is gone. And Zac Jackson of The Athletic, one of the most respected football minds covering the Browns, made the most unambiguous argument of all. On the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, Jackson was not asked specifically about whether Watson or Shedeur should start. He was speaking more broadly about the Browns' organizational direction. But his words applied directly. They'll be 1-5 at best. There's just no upside to playing Deshaun Watson. This team is rebuilding. This team is pointing towards the future. The only thing that makes even a little bit of sense to me is play Shedeur Sanders, let him learn, let him develop, find out about him. Deshaun Watson, you've been driving down the wrong road for 5 years. You've got to turn around at some point. Driving down the wrong road for 5 years. That is Zac Jackson, not a radio host, not a social media account, not a podcast personality, a credentialed reporter at The Athletic saying the quiet part out loud. Watson's presence in this competition is not just athletically questionable. It is organizationally wrong. It is a franchise continuing to prioritize a past investment over a present opportunity. And every day they spend debating whether Watson deserves to start is a day they are not giving Shedeur Sanders the environment he needs to become what they actually need him to become. Now let's go back to the Watson OTA and minicamp numbers, because they are the one piece of evidence that genuinely complicates the narrative. In the spring sessions, Watson went 90 for 133 with 13 touchdowns and 3 interceptions across the full OTA and minicamp period. Sanders went 79 for 113 with 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Watson's numbers on their surface look better. More completions. Significantly more touchdowns. Same interceptions. And the people who believe Watson has earned the starting job will point to those numbers every time someone questions his inclusion in this competition. But here is what those numbers do not tell you. They do not tell you when those completions happened. Watson was ahead early in the spring when he had more first-team reps. Shedeur closed the gap dramatically in the final 3 to 4 weeks, the exact period Monken called too close to call. They do not tell you what the defenses looked like. They do not tell you which receivers ran the routes. They do not tell you how many of Watson's touchdowns came in scripted red zone periods versus live 11-on-11 competitive reps, and most importantly, they are spring practice numbers. Without pads. Without full defensive intensity. Without the kind of pass rush pressure that exposed Watson repeatedly in the seasons before his injuries. And there is one more dimension to this story that sits underneath everything Watson said at that Wednesday press conference. The Browns' own executive, J.W. Johnson III, told fans to support Watson if he wins. That framing, if he wins, is an organizational acknowledgement that the competition is real and that Shedeur winning it is a legitimate possibility. You do not tell fans to prepare to support the winner if the winner is already decided. That conditional statement is itself evidence that the organization does not know who is going to win this competition. And Watson's "I can't control what people support" message, measured, defiant, composed as it was delivered in the context of an organization that was not fully certain he would still be their starter come September 13th. The most telling moment of the entire Wednesday session was not Watson's answer. It was what happened immediately after it. Shedeur Sanders made a statement that was shared on video on June 7 and had already resonated deeply with Browns fans before the minicamp even started. Standing on the practice field in Berea, in a practice field interview that was not in a formal press conference setting, raw, unscripted, human, Shedeur said, "I understand, I really feel like the Browns fans, they just want something to hope for. They've been wanting it so long. So finally, I'm here to change that. I'm here to change that. Not I hope to change that. Not I'm going to try to change that. I'm here to change that." Present tense. Confident tense. The tense of a man who has already decided what his role in this story is going to be, and has already decided that the story ends with him changing the history of Cleveland Browns quarterback play. Watson's shocking message was measured, defiant, and carefully constructed. It was the message of a professional who has learned to survive in a storm. But Shedeur's response, "I'm here to change that," was the message of someone who is not just trying to survive in Cleveland. He is trying to transform it. And when those two messages sit next to each other, Watson's cool composure and Shedeur's quiet transformation energy, the question of whether Watson's message was meant for Shedeur becomes almost irrelevant. Because the more important question is whose message is going to resonate louder in training camp when the pads go on and the real competition finally begins. Training camp opens July 28th. The answer is 31 days away. Disclaimer. That is the full story: Watson's shocking message, the executive's fan warning, Shannon Sharpe's countdown, Tim Hasselbeck's credibility bomb, Zac Jackson's wrong road verdict, the spring OTA numbers in full context, and Shedeur's "I'm here to change that" response. June 27, 2026. Drop your comment below. Do you think Watson's message was aimed at Shedeur, the fans, or the coaching staff? And do you believe his OTA numbers are enough to win the starting job? Every opinion welcome. See you July 28th. This video is produced strictly for entertainment and informational purposes only. All quotes, reports, and statements referenced throughout this script are sourced from publicly available and verified sports journalism published between May and June 2026. Deshaun Watson's direct quotes are sourced from his official Cleveland Browns media availability as reported by Yardbarker, dated June 11 to 12, 2026. J.W. Johnson III's statements are sourced from his public media availability as reported by Yardbarker, dated April 2026. Shannon Sharpe's statements are sourced from the Nightcap podcast episode of June 21, 2026, as covered by Cleveland Browns community. Tim Hasselbeck's statements are sourced from his public appearance on ESPN's NFL Live as referenced by Gridiron Heroics. Zac Jackson's statements are sourced from his public appearance on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show as covered by Dog Pound Daily. Shedeur Sanders' "I'm here to change that" quote is sourced from a publicly available practice field interview shared on June 7, 2026, as covered by Gridiron Heroics. Watson and Sanders' OTA/minicamp statistics are sourced from Yahoo Sports/Essentially Sports. All Todd Monken quotes are sourced from verified Browns press conference reporting. This channel does not represent or claim affiliation with Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, the Cleveland Browns, the NFL, or any individual or organization mentioned. This is a developing story. All competition and depth chart details may change through training camp and the 2026 preseason. For confirmed QB1 decisions, refer to official Cleveland Browns communications.